Hello and welcome to Gravitas US Edition, coming to you live from New York with me, Molly Gambhir. All through the week, we are keeping you on top of each and every development around the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's highly anticipated, all-important and crucial maiden state visit to the United States. It is June 20th. The Indian Prime Minister is on his way to the United States. He will be landing here in just a few hours from now. What exactly is his day going to look like? Let's get you the details. Prime Minister Modi will be welcomed by the Indian diaspora at the airport. The excitement levels have only been soaring. He will also be welcomed by the Indian diaspora at the hotel where he will be staying. He will then be meeting over 24 thought leaders from different walks of life. Let's tell you what we know so far. This includes the likes of Elon Musk, famous astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who hosts the podcast Star Talk. There's also Grammy Award-winning singer Falu Shah, Paul Roma, Ray Dalio, Nicholas Nassim Taleb, Jeff Smith, Chandrika Tandon will also be there, among others. These are just a few names on that long list, by the way. Tomorrow, that is the 21st of June, is going to be a very important day as far as the itinerary is concerned. It is the 9th International Yoga Day, after all. And the Indian leader will be leading the International Yoga Day celebrations at the United Nations through that yoga event at the United Nations headquarters here in New York. And this event will be attended by eminent figures from around 180 countries. And after this, Prime Minister Modi will be leaving for Washington, D.C. That's the second leg of that trip. And we will be keeping you up to speed with all those developments. In Washington, D.C., he will be attending an event on skilling and capacity building. He will be conducting a meeting with business leaders. And in the evening, the Indian Prime Minister will be having a private meeting with the US President Joe Biden. A lot on the table there. Here in New York, we have been speaking to Indian Americans who are all set to welcome the Indian Prime Minister as he makes his way to the United States. The very fact that this is a state visit of the Indian Prime Minister is enough indication of the strong emphasis that the United States really lays on the cooperation with India. And this visit is set to boost that partnership to an entirely new level altogether. On the agenda, of course, will be that all-important meeting with the US President Joe Biden, like I just mentioned. And defense cooperation will be a very crucial aspect as far as this entire visit is concerned. Speaking of his itinerary in terms of the day-to-day schedule, the one thing that really stands out is how the Indian Prime Minister will be having back-to-back engagements. And here on Gravitas, we will be dissecting all those developments for you, telling you also about the significance and why this state visit is this significant. Remember, a state visit is reflective of the deep and close partnership between India and the United States. After all, a state visit is the highest ranked visit as per diplomatic protocol, and that is reflective of the deep and close bilateral relations. In fact, the highest expression of friendly bilateral ties between the two countries. And let's go straight across now to our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who has also been tracking all those developments right here on the ground. Siddhant, tell us more about the list of attendees that we were just looking at. You know, there are some very prominent names on that list. The engagement that the Indian Prime Minister will be having, the first engagement, in fact, right after he lands in New York, and just the diverse list and what that really signifies.
Well, Molly, I'm standing in front of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's hotel here in New York, where he's expected to reach in about 1 hour's time. And the diaspora is gathering to give him a warm reception. Now, today, of course, he meets thinkers and also CEOs of companies, something that has now become a permanent fixture of his foreign visits. He, of course, meets Elon Musk, and this is something that has been the big buzz this is the first meeting of the Indian Prime Minister with Elon Musk since his takeover of Twitter. But all in all, when it comes to his engagement, you look at the list of people, it's from a diverse section of the American society that showcases how India is reaching out to not only policymakers but members of the society, and that forms the substratum of the India-US relationship, not just the people-to-people relationship, but these people as well. Many of them are Indophile. Many of them have publicly expressed their appreciation of the rise of India, and we will get to hear them as well. But when it comes to Elon Musk, what he says after the meeting with the Indian Prime Minister is something that is expected to be a market mover. We know that Tesla is keen to form a base in India. It's keen to get regulations from some kind of relaxation from the Indian government. And this is something that is much awaited.
Right, and Siddhant, we of course have been speaking to a number of Indian Americans as well who cannot wait to welcome the Indian Prime Minister as he lands here in New York, and to show all that enthusiasm on the streets as well. They gathered on the 18th of June as well through that India Unity Day March. Just to talk about the engagements that the Indian Prime Minister will be having, Siddhant, and how this is also about the deepening trust between the two sides, stronger people-to-people ties, and how defense cooperation, sharing of technology. The overall theme also, one of the aspects is about lifting of barriers when it comes to the sharing of technology, which iCET is a very strong example of, the initiative on critical and emerging technology.
Well, yes, Molly, diverse the topics of conversations will be there here when the Indian Prime Minister lands. But talking about the people-to-people relationship, 4 million Indian Americans forming that key living bridge between India and America. I just spoke to a few Indian Americans who were quite enthusiastic about Indian Prime Minister's visit, and we know that they plan to give him a very warm and a reception that they have been planning for days now. But essentially in Washington we will see that reaffirmation of how India and America are coming closer from a range of topics, from defense, critical technologies, removing of barriers, something you have pointed out, and something that the American NSA had spoken last week in New Delhi, standing alongside the Indian NSA. And we need to understand that India is the 5th largest economy. It is the most populated country. It has its own set of requirements, and it needs technology that can be trustworthy, and both countries are looking to become each other's trusted partners, especially in terms of technology, and that is something we will get to hear a lot. But in the next few days, till Friday, we will see a visible manifestation of the warm relationship and how both countries are celebrating this relationship. Now, remember, this is a significant moment given that just 2 decades ago, India and the US weren't very good friends, and we have seen gradual evolution in the relationship, and both ways, whether it's New Delhi and whosoever is in power in New Delhi, or whether it's here in Washington, bipartisan support for a stronger India-US relationship. And of course, China has its role as well, given that China remains a common threat for India and the US both, and it has been a country which poses a lot of worry for many countries in the Indo-Pacific, and the stability.
Right, and the transformative moment that it is for the India-US relationship, something that has been talked about during those engagements in the run-up to the Indian Prime Minister's state visit as well. We are leaving it there for the moment. Siddhant, thanks very much for those updates. Now, for now, all eyes also on the 21st of June. It's going to be a very important aspect of this visit of the Indian Prime Minister. Like we just mentioned, he's going to be engaging in an hour-long session on International Yoga Day. According to reports, people from 180 countries will be attending that event. They will be including diplomats, there will be leaders from across the world, artists, cultural figures, academicians, there will be entrepreneurs, just to name a few of those on the list. Now, where exactly will this event take place? Let's just take you through the details. In the North Lawn of the UN headquarters right here in New York. What time will the event be taking place at? This will be between 8 and 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. What will be the theme for this event, if you're wondering? The theme is the same as the G20s. That's Yoga for Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which roughly translates to yoga for the welfare of all as one world and one family. Now, ahead of the event, India's Minister of Earth Science has shared these images. He says as the Prime Minister performs yoga at the UN headquarters, he will be joined by thousands of people in Antarctica, the Arctic, also the Himalayan regions. You heard that right. In fact, many Indians across the world have started organizing events in the run-up to that big day on the 21st of June and that highly anticipated occasion. Who all will be present at the event? Let's take you through the details now. Among the top dignitaries will be Antonio Guterres, the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations. There's also the President of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly on the list, of course. Also Amina J. Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and others who have made public their participation at the event are Osama Abdel Khalik, the permanent representative of Egypt to the United Nations, also Wala Afshar, the chief digital evangelist at Salesforce. Now, as far as the UN Secretary General's message for the Yoga Day is concerned, let's take you through what he has said. Yoga unites. It unites the body and mind, humanity and nature, and millions of people across the globe for whom it is a source of strength, harmony, and peace. In a dangerous and divided world, the benefits of this ancient practice are particularly precious. Now, here's the thing. 9 years ago, Prime Minister Modi successfully lobbied the United Nations to designate the 21st of June as International Yoga Day. And in his address during the opening session of the 69th session of the General Assembly, he said, and I'm quoting, "Yoga is an invaluable gift from our ancient tradition. Yoga embodies unity of mind and body, thought and action, a holistic approach that is valuable to our health and our well-being. Yoga is not just about exercise. It is a way to discover the sense of oneness with yourself, the world, and the nature." Now, recognizing yoga's universal appeal, on the 11th of December 2014, the United Nations proclaimed June 21st as the International Day of Yoga. This was by a resolution that was proposed by India and endorsed by a record 175 member states. And since then, Prime Minister Modi has harnessed yoga as a cultural soft power, to stretch the country's diplomatic reach and flex its rising place in the world. In fact, Prime Minister Modi has promoted yoga so much that even foreign diplomats have been seen stretching themselves in gardens and their embassy offices. They have taken to social media to show themselves folding in different postures. On Wednesday, we will be witnessing a display of India's soft power playing out right here at the heart of the United Nations. And we will be there covering it all live for you from inside the UN headquarters right here in New York. I am standing right outside the United Nations headquarters where the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be leading the International Yoga Day celebrations on the 21st of June.
Watch India's global channel as it joins Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Mega Yoga Day celebrations.
In the biggest display of Indian soft power from the seat of multilateralism, International Yoga Day. A comprehensive coverage all this week, only on WION World is One.
US President Joe Biden has been in office for exactly over 2 years now. And immediately after he became the president, his first high-profile international summit was with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Let's go straight across now to John Kirby speaking.
Inexorable trajectory as we support India's emergence as a great power that will be central to ensuring U.S. interests in the coming decades. After years of strengthening our ties, the United States-India partnership is deeper and more expansive than it has ever been in the past. We now look instinctively to each other and work cooperatively with each other to uphold a free and open Indo-Pacific, to drive innovation, jointly tackle global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Together, and working with other like-minded partners, our countries will shape the future, working towards a world that, again, is open and more prosperous, more stable, more secure, and quite frankly, more resilient. Now, we'll take some questions. Let's see, who's in the front here? Go ahead.
Thank you, John. I wanted to touch a little bit, if you could, in the how much Ukraine is going to be. Oh, of course, sorry. I'm Beatrice. I'm with EFE, news agency in Spanish. I wanted to ask about Ukraine. Ukraine has been proposing for months now. They have been proposing a peace summit, and they have expressed interest in having India as a participant in this global peace summit. So I was wondering if this will be part of the conversation between the President and Prime Minister Modi, and what is the stance of the United States regarding this summit, if this summit should take place, and if it should include Russia. Thank you.
So, just to lay flat where we are on a peace summit, look, we all want to see this war end. We'd like to see it end today. And as I've said many times, it could end today if Mr. Putin would do the right thing and pull his troops out. Now, obviously, he's not going to do that. And he's doubling down. And there's some pretty vicious fighting going on right now in the east and in the south of Ukraine. We have said many times that we support President Zelensky's vision of a just peace. And we've said many times that any discussion, any credible discussion, whether it's at a summit or somewhere else or in smaller settings, any discussion would be welcome only if it's going to be credible and sustainable, which means that it has to start with a foundation of a belief in Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, and at least start with a discussion of the 10-point proposal that President Zelensky has put forward. You've heard President Biden say a million times, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That exists today. Now, as for the role of other nations, we have also long said we would welcome the role.
We were listening into John Kirby highlighting the agenda and what really is expected and overall the significance of the Indian Prime Minister's visit. Now, like I was just mentioning, US President Joe Biden is set to host Prime Minister Modi for that state visit, and the significance of that move is the US is focusing on its strategic relationship with India as a top priority, and that in itself is a very strong message. And this partnership has progressed also at a time when almost every other major bilateral relationship, be it with adversaries or allies, has experienced a lot of challenges. And today, America is arguably India's most comprehensive security partner. And the collaboration extends from intelligence, maritime ties, also space exploration, cyber cooperation. And the US is also, perhaps, India's most comprehensive economic partner. That is, if we take into consideration research and development, education, technology, employment, energy, healthcare also. India is that one rare country on which both the Republicans and the Democrats are on the same page, and that's very significant. In fact, both the parties compete to project themselves as the better partner for India. But how were the contours of this strategic partnership drawn exactly? And how have the ties between the largest democracy and the oldest one evolved over the years? What lies ahead for their bilateral relationship? And how will the new defense deals propel the India-US bilateral relations? Our next report explores. India's ties with the United States are set to enter a new phase, with Prime Minister Modi's first state visit to the country. Immediately after he lands, the two sides will sign a slew of agreements pertaining to defense industry cooperation. From jet engines to killer drones, an array of defense equipment is on the table. The roadmap to acquire or jointly produce them has been laid out. It was finalized earlier this month during a meeting between India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. The two of them initiated negotiations on a framework for the security of supply arrangement and a reciprocal defense procurement agreement. An agreement which will be finalized during Prime Minister Modi's meeting with Joe Biden. So, which deals are expected to be announced? Well, the first one is a $3 billion deal for the procurement of 31 MQ-9B drones. It was cleared last week by New Delhi. An official announcement will be made following Prime Minister Modi's talks with Joe Biden. The second deal is the manufacturing of GE F414 jet engines in India. This one has been agreed upon by India's HAL and America's General Electric. This deal will make India one of those rare countries that can manufacture jet engines indigenously. Both these agreements will be historic. They will add to the growing closeness of India-US ties, propel their defense cooperation to the next chapter, and add to the long list of defense frameworks between the two countries. But how were the contours of this partnership drawn? Well, the first big step came in 2005. This is when the new framework for India-US defense relations was signed. It marked the full-scale beginning of defense cooperation. Then, in June 2010, the United States and India formally convened the first US-India strategic dialogue. Attending the summit, US President Barack Obama called the relationship a defining partnership in the 21st century. Then, in September 2013, India and the US signed the Joint Declaration on Defense Cooperation. It elevated the defense relationship to the level of closest partners. In July 2018, the US eased export restrictions for high-technology product sales to India and designated New Delhi as a Strategic Trade Authorization 1 or STA1 nation. This made India the only South Asian nation to be added to America's most important allies list. The same year, in September 2018, India and the United States signed the COMCASA, Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement. This gave India access to advanced defense technology in America. And in 2019, India became eligible for funding under the US Department of Defense's Maritime Security Initiative. Today, the India-US strategic partnership is a broad-based and multi-sectoral affair. And this is irrespective of who is in the White House. You see, New Delhi and Washington have been called natural allies with shared democratic values, and now with the arrival of the US Defense Secretary in New Delhi, they are turning another page in the strategic partnership. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's maiden state visit to the United States is reflective of the deep and close partnership between the two sides, and an opportunity to set new benchmarks in defense cooperation, which has emerged as a pivotal aspect in the relationship. Molly Gambhir in New York for WION World is one. And to better understand this upgrade in the India-US strategic partnership, I caught up earlier with Kenneth Juster, who was the United States ambassador to India from 2017 and 2021 at New York Central Park. Let's play out the most crucial aspects and excerpts of that conversation. The Indian Prime Minister will be heading to the United States for his maiden state visit. what does this visit really mean for the relationship between India and the United States? And who better to pose those questions to than someone who's actually been involved very closely in deepening this relationship between the two sides. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for speaking to us and helping us better understand what the visit really means for the defense relationship specifically between India and the United States, given that we are expecting a number of crucial defense-related announcements on the cards. But just to begin with, what are the expectations here in the United States from the state visit of the Indian Prime Minister and how it would be a boost to the partnership from here onwards?
Well, everyone's looking forward to the Prime Minister's first state visit. This relationship has been growing in leaps and bounds for the last 20 plus years, and this will be just another important step forward in the strategic partnership between the two countries.
Just to put things in perspective in terms of the all-important deal to jointly manufacture jet engines in India, what makes this deal so significant and what makes it stand out according to you?
Well, this is significant because the United States has never allowed this type of technology to be given to any other country. And my understanding is there'll be several significant manufacturing technologies turned over to India, and there'll be co-production of these jets, which are a crucial component for any aircraft, and it will help the United States and India work together in building aircraft indigenously in India.
As far as the hurdles in the relationship are concerned, speaking of the challenges that lie ahead, what comes to your mind in terms of some of the issues that need to be ironed out from here onwards?
Well, I think there are always going to be issues where the two sides may not see eye to eye, but that's why it's a partnership. It's not an alliance. We understand that we have differences and we discuss them openly and candidly. But what's truly remarkable is if you look at the progress over the last 22 years in this relationship, I don't think anyone, when I first began working on it in 2001, could have foreseen quite where we are today. And the defense relationship is a critical component of that overall partnership.
And the Indian Prime Minister is quite popular here in the United States. We heard the US President earlier on as well talking about how he's having a difficult time just managing the number of requests that have been coming in for that state dinner as well.
Well, that's always going to be the case with a state dinner, but in this case you have a large Indian American diaspora, so you have many people who identify very closely with this strategic partnership and want to be part of the festivities.
So keeping that in mind, how important is this visit for US President Joe Biden and his domestic audience here?
Well, I think it's always helps a president when he can look effective in foreign policy, and the India-US relationship is clearly one of the strengths of the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy and its overall foreign policy internationally. So I think it's going to only be a positive occurrence for the president, especially, as I said, when you have a large Indian American population in this country, over 4 million people.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. Good to
Thank
have
you. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Now, it's not just defense ties that will be getting a boost. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden are also expected to talk at length about sharing critical technology or cooperation in the tech space. And there is already a framework to enable such cooperations, by the way. It is called the US-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, or iCET. You will be hearing this acronym a lot as we move closer to that crucial state visit. So let's just first try and understand what iCET is really all about. Last week, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met with his US counterpart Jake Sullivan. Together, they unveiled a roadmap to boost collaboration in high technology areas. This was a part of the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, or iCET. The framework was announced in May 2022 by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. It identifies areas of mutual interest in technology cooperation in areas such as artillery systems, armored infantry vehicles, maritime security, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, and wireless telecommunication. Through iCET, India and the US aim to elevate their strategic technology partnership as well as defense industrial cooperation, not just between governments, but between businesses and academic institutions as well. One of its key purposes is to overcome bureaucratic barriers in tech transfer. Doval and Sullivan discussed reducing these barriers and allowing an easy exchange of technology. That said, the focus remains on GE F414 engines. India wants to domestically co-produce these engines with the US. This will be a joint collaboration between General Electric Company and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The deal is to be finalized during Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US. If things go well, the US will transfer an impressive 80% of jet engine technology by value. So far, only 4 countries have mastered jet engine technology. This includes the US, the UK, France, and Russia. India will join this elite group once the deal goes through. You see, the US distinguishes between technology transfer to allies and non-allies. India is not an ally to the US, but a strategic partner. So India receiving the jet engine technology will be a huge boost to bilateral ties between the two countries. That is what iCET aims to do. It seeks to position New Delhi and Washington as trusted technology partners. This includes strengthening cooperation on human spaceflight, developing 5G and 6G networks, and adopting open RAN network technology in India. This is part of India's mission to lead the global south into its 6G era. In the past year, there have been multiple high-profile visits and talks between Indian and US officials. The two countries have already put in place the Quantum Coordination Mechanism. Under this, they signed a Memorandum of Understanding or MOU to establish a semiconductor supply chain. They have also launched a public-private dialogue on telecommunication and held important exchanges on AI and space. A new initiative to boost cutting-edge technology cooperation will also be inaugurated tomorrow. It is called the IndiaUS and will be held by the defense ministries of India and the United States. You see, the developments are promising. All eyes are now on the GE jet deal.
iCET is about more than just technology. It's about building people-to-people ties, deepening trust, and building further on the foundation that has already been laid between the two sides to further strengthen defense cooperation in ways that benefits both the countries strategically as well as economically. Molly Gambhir in New York for WION World is One.
So defense cooperation clearly is going to be a very crucial aspect of the Indian Prime Minister's state visit. At this point, joining me is a very special guest on the broadcast, Elvis Colby, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development. He's also going to be engaging with the Indian Prime Minister and will be attending that event as well. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. Welcome to WION World is One. Let me begin by asking you, Elbridge, for just the fact that the anticipation in the run-up to this event has been far-ranging in terms of the expectations. As far as defense cooperation is concerned as well, and you will be meeting the Indian Prime Minister as well, tell us about what the expectations are.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you. I think expectations are very high. I think National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan gave an interview recently saying, the sort of something to the effect of the sky is the limit for the relationship between India and the United States. And I've seen myself in the recent months that perspectives on both sides are very high. Obviously, you mentioned the jet engine deal is just one facet, and hopes for further coordination and defense industry cooperation. So I think there's a very deep alignment, and I'll say that goes across the political spectrum here in the United States. Obviously, there are a few exceptions here and there, but overwhelmingly, there's very strong support for India and a stronger India and a deeper U.S.-India partnership.
Right. Elbridge, tell us more about the event that you will be attending, that the Indian Prime Minister will be there for.
Well, I haven't participated yet, so I wouldn't want to characterize it, but I'll say that it will be an enormous personal and deep honor to be able to meet Prime Minister Modi I think the way he's conducted, certainly the foreign policy. I'm not an expert on the internals of India, but of course, India has grown phenomenally in recent years, but also its perspective on foreign policy is one I think is not only makes sense for India, but sometimes I wish we would adopt it a little bit more here in Washington. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from him directly. Again, a great personal honor. And, to the extent that I'll have the opportunity to speak, I'll stress something that I know he and his government are already very concerned about, which is the rising challenge from China. I mean, I know Secretary Blinken was in Beijing, and I have some objections to that. But I do think here in the United States, we see China as our primary rival. And I know India is quite concerned as well, intelligently, not looking to provoke a situation where we can avoid it, but certainly negotiating with China from a position of strength, because that's clearly what they'll respect.
Indeed, Elbridge, defense cooperation, like you just mentioned, is a very important aspect of this visit. As far as sharing of technology is concerned, and the iCET, also the GE deal, and the very fact that this visit will take defense cooperation between the two sides to a whole new level, how significant is it for the two sides to be sharing technology and just lifting barriers overall?
I think it's enormously significant, and I sometimes am critical of the government for not moving faster on our side, but we do have to give credit here for things like the jet engine production, co-production potential, and sharing of technology. Obviously, there's, the United States and India are two governments and countries with their own interests and intellectual property and so forth. And of course, India wants to bring a lot more of its defense industrial production home, which, makes sense over the long term. So, there's some tough negotiating going on. But I think overall, the trajectory is in exactly the right way. And I'm always urging on our side that we should be trying to err on the side of sharing and pushing more out to India, because obviously, to put it kind of bluntly, we face we want to present China with two very strong, great powers on its different borders, which will make it more likely to respect both of our interests together. So the stronger India is, the wealthier India is, the stronger the Indian military is, the better off we will be and our allies in East Asia like Japan and so forth. So I think this is a very encouraging. It's part of a kind of a secular trend, but it has accelerated in recent years, and that's very important. And Prime Minister Modi's visit is an important milestone in that story.
Indeed, the US and India are standing at a very crucial juncture at this point. Elvis Colby, appreciate very much you joining us here, and we'll also look forward to speaking to you after your engagement with the Indian Prime Minister, so you can tell us more about what that was like. Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Now, here in New York, there is a lot of buzz and excitement around iCET, also the defense cooperation, and how it is set to take a whole new step forward as far as the partnership between the two sides is concerned. And we spoke to Jonathan Watchell as well to just better understand what this GE deal, the transfer of technology, iCET, really means for the relationship and the potential and the challenges that lie forward. The US and India are standing at a transformative moment as far as their partnership is concerned, and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit, the maiden state visit to the United States here, is all set to provide a boost to that cooperation. With me right now is Jonathan Watchell, former senior policy advisor at the US State Department. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for being here with us. I want to start by asking you for your comments on the expectations that the US really has from this visit, and how it's going to be a multifaceted visit when it comes to deeper cooperation in the defense sector, space, climate change, so on and so forth.
This is a big deal. This visit is no small matter. It comes just on the heels of Secretary Blinken's trip to China, which is very symbolic in and of itself, and sort of puts the scene setter for the significance of what it means that the Indian Prime Minister is coming to the United States, invited to the United States by the President of the United States. A state visit is a big deal also.
Speaking of which, Lloyd Austin has said that the two countries stand at a transformative moment, and the partnership, as far as the defense cooperation is concerned, we're seeing a significant expectation in terms of deepening of those ties through the sharing of technology. And it's been said that, the deliverables from this visit are also to do with lifting some of the hurdles that have lied in that path. In that respect, how significant is iCET and the potential that that initiative has?
The very fact that we're talking about sensitive manufacturing of parts, military parts potentially, engines for warplanes, that the United States would be involved in helping to manufacture it, to actually open up the manufacturing of those parts within India itself, is instrumental in terms of what the relationship is shaping up to be. It's kind of unimaginable. One of the most sacred things for any country is their defense, is their weaponry, is their top technology in that area. And to be willing to not only just share that or have India purchase that, but to actually manufacture parts, incredible.
Speaking of which, the GE deal and even the deal to buy American drones, these are on the cards, and these are going to significantly take the partnership forward between the two countries. What do you think will be the challenges that lie ahead from here onwards?
Technology is a very sensitive thing.
Right.
So the fact that we're talking about drones, which are now, we're seeing it play out in Ukraine in the war right now and in other theaters where there's fighting going on. Drones are a central weapon in any military conflict. India knows this. India has some flashpoints of its own. With China, there's your neighbor Pakistan. There are real problems. Afghanistan has not been the greatest neighbor either. It's a tough neighborhood you're in. And the realization that India has that it needs to have the most sophisticated drones in its repertoire of weaponry says a lot about India's maturity and recognition of its needs at this fundamental period in time.
Jonathan, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Molly.
Thank you. So that was all about the Indian Prime Minister's highly anticipated maiden state visit to the United States here. We will, of course, be getting you the minute-by-minute developments and dissecting them for you. But let's just shift focus for now for a bit and tell you about what else is happening around the world and the other big headlines. This one, of course, is about China. China is in the news now for its aggressive posturing as far as the South China Sea is concerned. It's once again at it. Let me just tell you about what's happening now and the latest move. China is now building its first research port in the South China Sea. And this is significant because its state shipbuilding corporation is saying that the port will serve the interests of national defense. Let's just tell you more about what it has said. What it does not tell you, though, at this point, is that the port will help China fortify its claim on the disputed waters. And while it also will be enabling it to harness the potential of the resources under the seabed. You see, China has a constant aim to tap into the rich underwater resources, from drilling into the sea for resources to carrying out archaeological surveys, all of that. China has done it all. Now, this port specifically in the South China Sea opens yet another opportunity, a new front for deep sea research and experiments related to that. China has already announced that it will be docking experimental vessels in the port in order to ensure highly efficient operation. Now, China seems to claim nearly the entire South China Sea. We have been telling you about this right here on the show as well. Now, of course, the claims are wide-ranging. It also faces competing claims by Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, also Taiwan. Over $5 trillion worth of global trade passing through the South China Sea every year. What Beijing's new port in these waters signifies and what does it really mean for the world? Why is it crucial? Number one, of course, being that the Chinese president has been trying to get his grip tightened around the world. And this is around these disputed waters specifically, and this is why this port move is important. Number two, the experts fear that Beijing's increasing footprint in the South China Sea could potentially also restrict commerce. So that is another reason why this move has been raising eyebrows around the world. Now, China would like you to believe otherwise, and its officials have been making all sorts of statements to try and give out a message which was quite contrary to what's happening on the ground. Its officials, in fact, say that the port will contribute to navigational safety, but if anything, it will only further militarize the waters, like we've been telling you. China is building military bases in the South China Sea. It is also establishing illegal civilian settlements. There is also a Chinese hot pot restaurant in the disputed waters. You heard that right. Also, China has a cinema hall and a coffee shop there. These establishments, much like the proposed port, are nothing but a mere front for the Chinese claims of the South China Sea, which is why this latest development assumes significance. Now, for the first 234 years in America's history, no president or former president has been indicted, and this changed in March 2023. This is, of course, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. We are talking about him and the charges that were placed against him and his arrest, and what this move really means for his political career. We have been telling you about the significance of that development as well. He was charged with 34 felony counts in connection with the hush money payments as far as the adult film actress Stormy Daniels is concerned. And less than 3 months on, he was indicted yet again. This time, this was on 37 felony counts for mishandling classified documents and also impeding the investigations and the investigators. And that's not all. He also faces 2 other criminal probes, both related to interference in the 2020 elections. And this means that Donald Trump could very well be indicted again. And this is, of course, been, he has been a figure unlike any other in the country's history from his initial days in Washington. Trump has made headlines with his statements. We have been telling you about the controversies that those statements have generated as well. He seemed to revel in the political fight. He used the power of the presidential office to go after his perceived adversaries as well. From the Democrats to the news media, he really did not spare anyone, even foreign heads of state. Now he has fallen into this mess, which has been of his own making, as per experts. And a decade ago, President Obama was charged $375,000 in fine because he did not pay. He did not, of course, pay an adult film star, but there were questions around his campaign funds as well. An audit of the campaign's books showed that it failed to report donors who gave out large checks, and by large, I mean $2 million. That's the amount we're talking about here. And this was weeks before the 2008 election. The Obama campaign also kept $1.3 million more than the legal limit that was allowed for a federal campaign. But was Obama indicted for this, is the question. He wasn't. So was Donald Trump the victim of a witch hunt, like he's been calling it? He's been calling this political vendetta and how he has been targeted for political reasons. If anything, it was a goldmine of news headlines. There was a lot that was going on. Whatever Trump did was a new headline. There was fodder. It was fodder for news. It was something to attract eyeballs. And the Trump drama also boosted viewership, readership, and revenue across the media houses. And the ex-president has enjoyed a disproportionate amount of footage as far as the media coverage is concerned. And when he was arrested in April at the court itself, the number of journalists dwarfed the number of people at pro or anti-Trump rallies. The road outside looked like a street market. Dozens of gazebo tents were erected. The first ever arraignment of a president on criminal charges is no ordinary thing, and which is why this was the reason it dominated global headlines for weeks through and through. But can it really justify the minute-by-minute coverage of all those developments and the broadcasts? I'm not saying that Trump was innocent, of course, or that he shouldn't be indicted. What I am talking about is that Trump is essentially reaping what he sowed. And he spent much of his presidency making enemies, and now he's being served a taste of his own medicine. And just to better understand what Donald Trump's indictment, what his political career would look like, and if at all the media coverage has been questioned to the extent that it should have. We also spoke to Michael Tracy, who is an American journalist. Let's listen into the perspectives that he shared with us. And with that, it's a wrap on Gravitas US Edition. We're taking a very short break at this point, but through this week, here's a reminder, we're coming to you live from the United States to keep you on top of all those developments around the Indian Prime Minister's US state visit. With that, we're taking a very short break, but as we go, we're leaving you as always with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned.
Io ritengo qui che il caldo ci sta ovviamente. Abbiamo il tabulario naturalmente su cui poggia il palazzo.